Karl Marx has been identified by Robert J. Antonio as the founder of one of the three major sociological traditions and a central figure in the development of modern social theory. Marx was born and lived in 19th century Europe. He experienced the Industrial Revolution and believed that the excesses of capitalism he witnessed during his time required its overthrow and replacement with socialism. Marx wanted to explain why the world was the way it was. His most famous works, the Communist Manifesto and Das Kapital, lay out his analysis of world history as linear, progressive, and defined by class struggle. He believed that socialism would eventually replace capitalism in much the same way that capitalism had replaced feudalism. He believed that this would be a positive development because it would lead to a direct democracy wherein everyone was free from exploitation. Karl Marx was a London-based contributor to the New York Daily Tribune and the Vienna Presse during the American Civil War. He wrote articles about the Civil War for those papers, and he conducted correspondence with his friend Frederick Engels about the war. Marx is quoted by Gerald Hunkel as having understood the Civil War to be the first grand war of contemporaneous history. Marx himself wrote that the whole movement toward disunion is based on the slave question in his article The North American Civil War. He believed that the South was controlled by a small oligarchy of slaveholders who wanted to create an empire based on slavery by admitting as many new slave states to the Union as possible. When a firm opponent of slavery was elected in 1860, then the South chose to secede and identified slavery as the cornerstone of their new government. Lucia Pradella believes that Marx saw the Civil War as a clash between two economic systems. The North represented the progress that Marx believed the world had to attain before it could reach socialism. The South, on the other hand, was a neo-feudal system that represented a step backward from progress. Karl Marx viewed the Civil War as an opportunity for the labor movement to strengthen itself. Lucia Pradella writes that he viewed the abolition of slavery as laying the conditions for the growth of the labor movement and that it was the first step toward the emancipation of labor from capitalist slavery. Marx viewed both the industrial capitalism of the North and the agrarian slavery of the South as evil because they were both based on exploitation. Marx, however, believed that the North represented progress because industrialization produces a large wage labor class that could eventually overthrow capitalism after obtaining consciousness of its exploitation. The South represented a step backward. Slavery prevented the growth of a large wage labor class that could be mobilized for revolution. Gerald Hunkel notes that Marx was certain the future of the working class was involved in the cause of the North. Americans in both the North and South saw this war in many different ways and fought for many different reasons. Northerners fought to preserve the Union, spread industrial capitalism, or abolish slavery. Southerners fought for the self-determination of their state and to preserve slavery. Marx, however, believed the war was only about slavery. He wrote numerous letters and articles detailing his conviction that slavery was the only cause of the war. He felt that the 300,000 aristocratic plantation owners of the South had tricked poor whites into supporting secession against their own interests. The similar belief of Marx and Americans who thought the war was about slavery is significant because it establishes that slavery was a primary cause of the war. It is interesting that Marx viewed the war as only being about slavery because Lincoln went to great lengths to keep emancipation from becoming an objective of the war. It wasn't until the Emancipation Proclamation of 1863, which Marx supported, that Lincoln brought abolition to the forefront of the conflict. The difference between Marx and Americans fighting for either the Union or their state reveals how dogmatic and narrow his economic determinism was. He couldn't accept that poor whites would be so attached to their state, so he asserted that they had been tricked by the rich. Marx's opinions on the war changed very little over its course. He believed the North would win due to its larger population, greater industrial might, and the morally superior cause for which it fought. His opinions on the conduct of the war and the reconstruction that followed did change over time, though. Marx believed early in the war that the North's prosecution of the conflict was not aggressive enough. He openly discouraged Winfield Scott's Anaconda Plan while misattributing it to General McClellan. Following Lincoln's assassination, Marx prognosticated that his successor, Andrew Johnson, would be stern, inflexible, revengeful in his implementation of Reconstruction. Eventually, Marx became disillusioned with him for being extremely vacillating and weak in substance. What might be most telling about Marx's opinions is that he never conducted a rigorous analysis of the Civil War through the lens of his own ideology. This possibly reveals a weakness in his own philosophy for being unable to neatly explain why the Civil War had to occur, and it reveals his own narrow mindedness. He was unable to fit the war into his philosophy, so he ignored it. This exercise helps us understand the Civil War better because it provides the perspective of an outside observer. Marx helps us understand why England chose the cause of action it did during the war. He analyzed how the war created a raw materials shortage which could have led to British intervention, but the reality of food imports from the Union and strong anti-slavery sentiment at home prevented this action. His analysis reveals how globalized the economy became at this time. Many people view the Civil War as a war about slavery. While this was partially true, there were other reasons involved as well. The dismissal of these reasons by Karl Marx revealed the danger of intellectual rigidity and dogmatism.